Okay, we are live. We have 76 of you joining me at the beginning, but this number usually grows as the hour goes on. Welcome to Tuesday night. It feels like Friday night for me because tomorrow is the beginning of an awesome week. I get to be the mom of a wrestler, and we get to go to a wrestling tournament tomorrow. And then our family has a little gas tank vacation is what they call that in Florida, where you can drive to the place where you're going to take a little escape. So thank you for checking in. Thanks for telling me where you're from. And if you're a praying kind of person, you need to pray that I get this message right tonight, because I have truly been working forever on these slides to get it right. Michelle and I were practicing for the last 2.5 hours to say, oh, I need to do this before I do that. So please pray, because it's an awesome message and I really want you to understand it. I've had so many of you write in about what is this question? How is it? And I really want to deliver for you. So stick around, see how I do. Thanks for the sound check. And again, always tell me where you're from. Busha, Busha, Merry Christmas. Nice to see you. And this is going to be one of my better, if I can deliver. So I do want feedback on this, as you might have noticed from last week's live, this week's live, I left the commercials off. Now, several of you wrote in and said, you don't know what that means, but if it doesn't make much of a difference, then I'll turn it back on, but I would love to know if you notice. So in the meantime, we're going to start with some traditions. One of them is to check my numbers. I have been fasting since Sunday, and I will tell you that each fast since my 21-day challenge has ended, I think I eat later on Sunday every week because I keep saying, oh, I'm doing so good. I'm doing so good. And my numbers definitely have showed it the last few weeks. So once I start to fast, I'm pretty strict. I do stick to my guns. So glucose, let's see, is 61. Ketones are 0.8. And I was just thinking of my introduction as I was counting down the last couple of minutes. And I said, boy, if my glucose or if my ketones are low, I know it's because the last 2.5 hours have been super stressful getting ready for this to make sure I can deliver for you. I actually don't, I'm not super sad of a 0.8. My fast has been good, but I think I've been using them every square minute of the last 2 hours. I am going to add some Pucker Up to my drink tonight. The last few weeks I have been drinking it. I like it the best only because it's got nothing but pure ketones in it. And I kind of like the simplicity of it. It is super sour. It's called Pucker Up for a reason. Other products do add the flavors, and this is just clear beta-hydroxybutyric acid, which is ketones, liquid ketones. So I will put it in here, and if you don't like lemons, you shouldn't do it. But I think it tastes great. Over the years of being keto, I've noticed that my attraction to sour is higher, and my tolerance for sweet is less. All right, so we are going to get started pretty quick here. I have a couple of announcements that I do want you to take notice of, and when I am careful to not do ads, but I want you to see something. So let me show this off just a quick second. So if you go to bozmd.com, this awesome little pop-up will show up. And it truly is, I think it's adorable, first of all. It turned out so nice. But this is a great little benefit, but it ends on Christmas Eve at midnight. It used to have two bags of BHB combo, but thanks to everybody ordering, we have officially sold out of that product. Now, as you know, I've been praying for you to help me get rid of it, and I mean that because I can't sell it after January 1st. In that same aspects, we've had some updates in the fulfillment center, and we have a few of the cucumber lemon that are now running on short supply or short time for when they expire. As far as let's see, I need to go to store. Where's store? Oh, here it is. when they expire. And if you don't drink them, then my kids and I are going to be drinking them for the next year. So I can't sell them after they're expired. But I want to show off actually a review of that cucumber lemon. So I'm going to go to the second page of the store, and you're going to see that the way at the bottom here, there is our cucumber lemon. We have given you some incentive to buy some of these. These incentives will go away as soon as we get rid of the products that are about to expire. So if you're cheap like me and you want the best price, this is a perfect place to start. But if I scroll down here, there's a really awesome review written by John. Now, you might recall that if I read your review on the show, they get a little gift. So I'm going to read his review because it was really awesome. He writes in on November 1st and says, I recently bought a tub of this cucumber lemon. I was surprised by how great it tastes. It's not overly sweet like some of the other brands that I've tasted. I was also very pleased at how it raised my ketones a half an hour after I drank it. I even felt better for hours after drinking it. I'm a true believer in the product. So John, because I read that, you'll get a little care package from me. Thank you for doing that. And I am happy to offer this to anybody who's looking for some discounts until we get through those final ones in the that are in the fulfillment center. Okay, so definitely have a big topic to cover tonight. And we did hear you last week when you said some of you were super thankful for the science of this, and some of you said you lost me. So I am going to start by, we've got a couple places where, here we go. We're gonna review. There's 3 weeks running here that we did some pretty good teaching. And I don't have bubble water for my my pucker up today. I just have regular water. I like the bubble water better, but that's not has nothing to do with the taste of it, just because I've been drinking bubble water for a long time. Okay, a few weeks ago I said I'm going to use me as an example. I'm going to do my labs, pay cash, tell you what they cost, and explain them. I'm not going to go through all of them again, but I am going to remind you that one of the things I quickly hopped over and said I will be spending maybe an inappropriate amount of time educating you on this in the next few weeks. So that's what this is. Last week, it was the beginning of it. I showed you my cholesterol and then unpacked a story of somebody who's come to our support group who rushed into keto and checked his cholesterol and gave us some awesome teachable moments. And I am using my cholesterol and his cholesterol to do some teaching. All right, so it shows you that my total cholesterol is above 200. So for sure, I'm going to need to go on a medication, right? It also shows you that my triglycerides are pretty low, 88. My good cholesterol, otherwise, which is a terrible name for it, but that's what we call it. All right, and my healthy cholesterol is over 100. That's a good sign. But that bad cholesterol, the stuff that's known as LDL cholesterol, should be less than 100. And mine's 155. So for sure, I'm going to need a medicine for that, right? All right, so when patients come in with this problem, the next step I look for is, are they inflamed? What is their level of chronic inflammation? So I'm not going to go through all this again, but you can go back and watch why I tested 3 things that measure inflammation. I checked a SED rate. It was beautiful at 5. I checked a highly sensitive C-reactive protein. CRP stands for C, just the letter, C, reactive protein. The HS stands for highly sensitive. You'll know you'll have the right one when it costs you $32. This is expensive. Oh, let's try that again. This is expensive. There's another CRP that's closer to $10. And then ferritin. And my ferritin came back really high. So that can be a sign of inflammation. And I went through this all in the other one. Go back and watch it if you want to. But the end result was I am not inflamed. I do not have chronic inflammation in my body. I do have plenty of iron. And I don't take iron supplements. I do eat liver. And I eat sardines. So then I said last week, I got all the way through this lesson and I said, okay, we're going to pick up next week by talking about ApoB and Lp(a). And I stressed out a ton of you because you went to try and get that. So if you were able to get your Lp(a) or your ApoB, or if you know it, type it in the chat. So I, on the original slides, way back 6 weeks ago or something, I accidentally showed you my Lp(a). But today I will show you that my ApoB is 75 and my Lp(a) is less than 8.4. So what does that mean? Well, that's what tonight's all about. So I am the first to tell you that as I have looked over several of your comments, I get it. I know that this is a very complex explanation, and I heard plenty of you saying you lost me. So I'm going to do a quick recap of what is going on inside my blood. Again, I'll start with the premise that I'm healthy. I haven't always been healthy. I have been insulin resistant, but right now I'm very thankful to say that I'm healthy. So this is a picture of a healthy liver. It's beautiful. It's pristine, maybe. And when you look at what comes out of my liver are these beautiful things called chylomicrons. Chylomicrons are the carrying agents for fat. Some of those fats are called cholesterol. Some of those fats are called triglycerides. And you can kind of see these tiny little pictures back here where I have things coming out of the chylomicrons because they turn into VLDLs. And you'll notice that this now says ApoB 100. The chylomicrons said ApoB 48. Don't worry about the numbers. Just remember, some of these say ApoB, some of them won't say ApoB. All right, so it gives away a few more triglycerides are coming out there. A few more of them are coming out of those carrying agents, and we now call this an IDL for intermediate sized. So these were the very low density lipoproteins. These are the intermediately low. So it's like mama bear, papa bear, and baby bear. Very low, intermediately low, and then the final ones are low, LDL. Okay, and this is all kind of boring so far because mine recycle back into my liver. There's a very special place they go into the liver, and these are certain receptors. These, again, in bigger picture, these are LDLs. Otherwise, if you go back a couple of slides, you'll know that that's my bad cholesterol. This is what's high. This is what when you do a cholesterol panel, it says, oh my gosh, this needs to be low. The parts I want you to recognize and notice very carefully here is that, see how it says ApoB? Don't look at the 100, just look at the ApoB, okay? I did an ApoB test, so we're gonna get to that. And then I want you to notice that these things that look like this, they're kind of circle, and then I put a tail on them. These are cholesterol. And you'll notice that there's a whole bunch of cholesterol in these LDLs. That these LDL cholesterol got their name because there is a bunch of cholesterol in them. Now, it is the perfect time for me to remind you of a couple of truths. That cholesterol is made in our body by every cell. Every cell knows how to make cholesterol. When you're stressed, kind of like I was for the last 2 hours, some cells can't make enough cholesterol to keep up with the stress. It's actually chronic stress that the delivery of cholesterol is coming around in these little bubbles, these little ships of fat. And at first, they dish out a whole bunch of triglycerides over and over and over and over again, fast as they can go. And everybody wants the triglycerides because they're easy to use. Every cell wants those. And they don't make triglycerides. They consume it for energy. But every cell can make cholesterol. It can't always make enough for its own needs. And that's where this little LDL cholesterol can give a little cholesterol here and a little cholesterol here. But for the most part, it recycles it back into the liver. It goes back into the liver, and the way into our body for cholesterol is our bodies make it, our cells make it. And cholesterol is what keeps our cells, they're fluid, they're adaptable, the cell lining is not stiff. The cholesterol helps it to be very fluid. It also allows things to go in and out of a cell because it's fatty, and so things can slip through it that are fat-based. But it's inside this little ship of whether it's a chylomicron or a VLDL or an IDL. What size the ship isn't so much the most important part, but that cholesterol, we say measure your cholesterol, and what we're really saying is LDLs, low density lipoprotein. And the reason it got its nickname is because, let's go back to the slide, there's a whole bunch of, there's a whole bunch of cholesterols in there. See inside there? A whole bunch of those. Okay, so now what happens next to this cholesterol? Well, you're going to watch. These receptors here are in my body, and they are going to take those low density lipoproteins, and they are going to put them in circulation, put them in the receptor, and they're going to recycle them back into the liver. Once they're in the liver, it becomes part of the bile. Our bile is stored in the gallbladder, and if you don't have a gallbladder, your liver just secretes it out. Bile is, again, made of a bunch of cholesterol, and the way out of your body, the way cholesterol gets out of your body is you squirt it out with some of the bile, and some of it you poop out, and some of it you emulsify other fats so you can absorb them, and the cycle goes on. All right, so that's what happens in healthy people. But I'm here to tell you that most of the people watching this video are not this healthy. They have Mr. Insulin inflamed. So this guy right here is inflamed, our inflamed Mr. Insulin. This is the kind of insulin I want you to have, which is normal amounts. We both started out with a healthy looking liver, but there has been a change in what's going on in your liver. And again, the reason we're talking about your liver is that's where cholesterol is packaged. It goes out into the blood, and that's where it's recycled. The only way out of your body is through the liver in your bile. So cholesterol comes in, gets made in your body. Really, most of the cholesterol we eat doesn't end up in our circulation. Most of the cholesterol in our body is made inside our cells, but the exit door is in our little lipoprotein, those LDLs. It's going to go to our liver, and we're gonna excrete it out in our stools. But you guys, not everybody watching this, and I didn't used to have a healthy liver. The first thing I did was I ate too many processed carbs, and I filled up all these storage bins full of sugar, and those are called glycogen, storage of sugar, glycogen. With my high insulin, I couldn't let it out of my liver. It just hung out in there. I like to think of it as it crystallized. After you make all of the storage you can out of sugar, the body knows how to turn sugar into fat. Now, the opposite of taking fat and turning it into a ketone. A ketone is what I'm drinking here. A ketone is what my body makes out of those triglycerides. Once I make a ketone, there's only two things that can happen. It can either be used as energy or you pee it out. It's water soluble, you pee it out. Not the case with the fuel called sugar. You eat too much sugar and insulin says, we're going to hold on to that. And the first place it stores it is those little bubbles called glycogen. But then if you continue eating an excessive amount of carbohydrates, you will fill your liver up with fat. So there's a bunch of triglycerides. They couldn't get out of the liver. Your body packaged them up, and then your liver turned gnarly. It got cirrhotic. It looks like it needs a transplant. I'd contend that the people who have non-alcoholic fatty livers, they have a fatty liver, they have NASH, non-alcoholic steatohepatitis. The people who are in line for a liver transplant, almost all of them, or the major percentage of them in America today, don't come from alcoholism. They come from an insulin that looks like that. And because what that insulin did to your liver is it did not let things out the exit. And now it's full. But it changes what it does to your cholesterol. All right, so that's why we're talking about this. So what's supposed to happen is these little LDLs are supposed to go to the receptors, recycle inside the liver, turn into bile, or get reprocessed into new chylomicrons. But with high insulin, well, let's actually go inside the blood vessel. So here is the normal liver right here, my normal liver. And typically what happens is your LDL cholesterols, those bad cholesterols all the way at the end, the mine that's too high at 155, they float through the blood and they go into the liver. And they do not slip through this little lining because you have this beautiful protection layer. It's called a glycocalyx. And if you're a cardiologist and you're doing a scope or you're putting in a stent and you're looking inside a blood vessel, you cannot see this little glycocalyx. It's like transparent. It's like a slime layer. But it is super important to protecting that none of the cholesterol get out of the bloodstream. They stay in the blood. And in healthy people, no problem. But when you have high insulin, the first thing the high insulin does is it breaks down that slime layer. And now you have naked skin cells. These are called epithelial cells. You have naked epithelial cells that are lining your blood vessels. And this is where the insulin is doing a naughty thing to the insides of your blood vessels, and it does a naughty thing to your liver. We already went through that. So now you have your gnarly looking liver over here. I don't know if you can see this very well, so I'm going to change the color of my pen to white. So you have this gnarly looking liver over here, and you have naked skin cells. Yeah, okay, here they come. So here comes some LDLs, and some of them are going to recycle into your liver. They're going to do what they're supposed to. You're trying to stuff that liver as much as possible. In fact, the liver's making cells like it's growing, like a stem cell. It's making other liver cells to keep up with all that you're eating. It's growing to be a really large sized liver. But because of those naked skin cells, that one LDL cholesterol got into the side, and it got oxidized. It changed color. So now notice this is purple. It still says ApoB, okay? But it's purple, and your body did a reaction where it sent in an immune response, and the immune response was to gobble up that cholesterol and get it out of the wall. It does not belong here. It's in the wrong spot. Get it out of our body. Get it out of our body. And if the insulin had gone down, you might have seen this go away, but it didn't go down. It got worse. You had more LDL cholesterols get oxidized. You have more LDLs slip in between those skin cells because the slime layer is gone, and the insulin keeps flaming, and the liver's full. So it can't get to its favorite parking spot. It's going to hide out in the section of your body, and that's where the disease of atherosclerosis, the fat, or it's like a pimple that ends up in the side of your artery, came from. All right, so we had this patient who came in and he wanted to know, I went keto and my cholesterol went terrible. And we want to know, well, which of these LDL cholesterols does he have? Does he have the light, fluffy LDL cholesterol, or have his cholesterol been circulating too long because it couldn't get in the liver and it hasn't quite slipped into the side door of his artery, thank goodness, and in his blood sample there's a bunch of LDL cholesterols. But I want to know which one he has, because if he has the fluffy one, it's not associated with a heart attack. If his size of his LDL cholesterol is bigger, it's safe. It gets recycled back into the liver and does okay. But if it stays in circulation, can't get in the liver, and gets oxidized, well, that's what causes a heart attack. So you can't tell by looking at that lipid panel which one do I have? Which one does he have? When you look at the big fluffy ones, if you eat a bunch of fat, and that's what he did. He was not keto. He went keto. He ate a bunch of fat, and this LDL cholesterol went up. I'll show you his numbers here in just a second. And then, of course, one is lowered by statins and one is not lowered by statins. Okay, here's where we left off last week. I'm going to remind you of this guy's cholesterol. I'm going to go to this scene here, actually. Okay, perfect. So it just gives me a little more space to write on. And so I'll remind you, here's my cholesterol, 276. And before this patient, he had his cholesterol checked about a month before he went keto, maybe a couple weeks before he went keto, and it was 215, so not quite under 200, but his triglycerides were 45. I mean, that's even better than mine. He's a man, which men tend to have lower HDLs than women, and his HDL, his good cholesterol, HDL is good cholesterol, right? It was 93. And his VLDL was 9, but his LDL cholesterol was 113. So all pretty good. And then he goes keto and everything goes to pot. He gets a total cholesterol over 300. His triglycerides are over 100. His HDL falls. I mean, it's still pretty good, but it still falls. His VLDLs went up and his LDL cholesterol, his bad cholesterol, went up. So you're like, oh, snap, doc, am I going to die? I'm like, well, we need to know which LDL do you have in your system? Okay, so here are two cholesterols that are talked about all the time, a good cholesterol and a bad cholesterol, right? So this guy is supposed to be the bad cholesterol and this guy is supposed to be the good cholesterol. Notice that this one has ApoB, this one is an ApoA. So HDL, the healthy cholesterol, LDL, bad cholesterol, these words are not appropriate. It is not a good cholesterol or a bad cholesterol, because when you look inside these things, they both just have cholesterol. They're not better or worse. They are being carried by different units within the body. And HDL is, it's a whole different beast. It would take me another 3 hours to explain HDL to you. Essentially, think of it as it's a helper of recycling. It's labeled with something different. It's got ApoA on it. It's not an ApoB. It's an ApoA, and it's helping to recycle where cholesterol is found and where it should be found and who's hungry for it. And it doesn't have a rate limiting factor of getting back in the liver like the LDL does. So I know I keep using bad and good because I am trying to explain it to those of you that have been using this language for 40 years. But really, cholesterol is just this. Oopsie, let's try to get it yellow because, that's just cool. So it is the little thing that is shaped like this, and sometimes you'll find it in the wall of these because it's fatty and it lets things go in and out. But for the most part, just look at all the cholesterol that's inside that LDL. Look at all the cholesterol that's inside this HDL. And that's it. That's all you get to say from it. You don't get to say good or bad. So if you say, all right, doc, well, what does this guy have? He shows up, he goes keto, and he has all of these labs that say he's gonna die. He's got a terrible cholesterol profile. It was pretty good, and now he went keto and it's a mess. So what are you gonna do? And I am here to say, you don't know what you're talking about yet. We don't have the data yet. Show me a few numbers. Show me how many of these VLDLs he has. Okay, well, that was in that panel. I don't know if you remember that, but it was 9 at first, and then it went up to like 14. Well, and what size are those LDLs? Those VLDLs. How about these bad cholesterol here? How many of them are the big fluffy kind, and does he have any that are the smaller kind that have been in circulation more, and then they got oxidized? That we also might want to know what's his HDL. How many of the healthy ones does he have around? And we can tell you a number, but getting size, getting actual particle counts, because that lipid panel, it does not measure LDL cholesterol. That LDL cholesterol is calculated. It also does not measure HDL. The HDL is calculated. So we're estimating HDL, and we're estimating the number of LDL. We're not actually measuring it. So what do? All right, the answer is nuclear magnetic resonance, okay, called NMR. NMR is a process where, to my knowledge, it's only done by one company across the country. That's not the one I really wanted to go to. Sorry, I was going to go up here to this one. It's done by one company across the country. They're in North Carolina, and it is a machine where they take that blood sample, they put it in a really intense magnet, And under that magnetic field, where the sample is like in the center of a magnet that goes all the way around the samples, they now send radio waves through there. Okay, and you're like, why do you care? Because it's really complicated. And people say, well, can't I just have this off at the lab? Nope, there's one lab in the country that does this, NMR. Now, the cost of an NMR, all the stuff I'm about to show you, is like, I think it was $82. I told my assistant this. Michelle, if you can remind me, I think it was $82, I said. But either $82 or $62. But it's not terribly expensive. The cost of I had an ApoB and I had an Lpa. My Lpa was $120. That's a lot. Okay, now it shouldn't be that expensive. That's naughty of them to charge you that much because it doesn't cost them that much. It's a pretty simple test. But when you send this lab into NMR, they put it in this magnetic field, they send a bunch of sound waves into it, and they come up with some answers. They can tell you how big a particle is. They can tell you what it's made of, like how much cholesterol's in there, how many triglycerides are in there, or at least what is the protein around. Is it an ApoA protein? Is it an ApoB protein? And what are the size? So my NMR results, I'm going to go through with you, and I want you to just bear with me, okay? This can be a little complicated, but don't run away. So the first thing they're going to tell me about is those VLDLs. Remember how you went from chylomicron, and then you gave away a bunch of triglycerides, and then you became a VLDL. So what they're looking at is they know that in this drop of blood right here, if there's a whole bunch of VLDL particles, you are more likely to have angry insulin, that insulin that's inflamed. If there are lesser number of particles, we know that the insulin is not overly inflamed. It's letting you trade and move those particles like they're supposed to. They're not hanging out. We call it residency time. They're not, setting up shop in your blood. They're going to where they need to go, and then they go back to the liver and do their thing. So in the spectrum of this drop of blood, how many particles do I have that are the LDL particles? And the number of particles that I have was 0.9. So that is pretty stinking healthy. It's not as low as it can be, but it's pretty good. And again, just to show you where this was at, was that first the chylomicrons came out, and then they gave away a bunch of triglycerides, and they became the LDL, or VLDL. Okay, and as the VLDLs give away a bunch of their particles, they become the IDL. Yes, that kind of fell off the screen there a little bit, but IDL. So again, both of them say ApoB. Remember that for the future. And in this NMR, what it was measuring was this: how many of those VLDLs are in circulation? And then it's going to do the next one, which is to say how many LDLs, specifically how many small LDLs are in circulation. Okay, let's go look at that. So the next question it's looking at is this little drop of blood. How many of the LDL particles could it find in my drop of blood? And my number was really good. I mean, it is in the green zone so far that it's off the chart. If insulin would have been around, you would have found the number up here, or at least somewhere between that 600 to 900. I've seen it 2,000. That is not a good sign. We want the small LDL particles to be very few in number. Okay? All right, so let's just make sure you see that. The other way that I could demonstrate this is I could show you that it was that purple guy that went through the skin layer that hung out and became this little fatty goo that kind of looks like a zit inside the wall of your artery. How many of those are in my circulation? And when they put it in the magnetic field and they shot a bunch of sound waves at it, they said, oh, she doesn't have very many of those, only 90. Okay, so now we've covered VLDL, and we've covered LDL. What about my tiny little fella, HDL? So inside that, again, how many HDL particles are in this drop of blood? And if we have a higher number than 7.3, so greater than 7.3, that would be really good. If I only have a few in circulation, again, in this drop of blood, you're going to find risk. So again, mine were 19.3, off the chart number of the good ApoA, not ApoB, in circulation. So the first thing that test did was says how many are in each drop. Now it also, that little fancy machine that they have in the magnet and the sound wave and all the fancy scientists looking, they're going to measure what's the size of her VLDLs. What's the size of her LDLs? What's the size of her HDLs? Okay, so they're going to go in and they're going to be able to measure, because of this fancy machine, what's the size of my particles. So that VLDL particle size, again, the smaller the VLDL particle size, the better. If insulin is excessive, it will be bigger. So mine was less than 42.4. I know the numbers don't matter to you. What I'm trying to show you is it was on the healthy side. If you quickly give away those triglycerides and you make that VLDL small, that's a healthy thing. That's what healthy people do. They get rid of those triglycerides and that particle shrinks to a smaller size. I get rid of mine really fast because it shrinks quickly. When I look at LDL particle size, we do not want small. We want big fluffy ones of this. Okay, I know this is confusing. Hang in there. I'm going to tie it all together. So what's the size of my particles, my LDL particles, after I've given away all the triglycerides? I mean, notice in here, the number of triglycerides in here is like 4. The number of cholesterol is like, I don't know, 50, 20, 30, whatever that number is. But the particle is filled with cholesterol because it's given away all of the triglycerides. And again, the size falls into that healthy zone. If it was small and dense, like if it was 19 or 20.0, you'd see that purple guy show up on the screen right there. All right, so finally, the HDL, the healthy particles. Again, we want bigger HDLs, but notice they're only 9 millimeters, so they're the smallest particle. But when you find that small particle, it's got that little ApoA on it. Well, how big is it? And I'm telling you, the difference is tenths of a nanometer. It's really small. So you cannot ask your average lab to do this. You need this really fancy machine of magnets and sound waves to measure this small size. And my HDL size was 10.8. Okay, good job. Pat me on the back. Wow, I got good numbers, right? Okay, but what I've usually got by this point is people are like, so what? Is the guy going to die of a heart attack in the next week because he went keto? What's the punchline? Well, I'll tell you that I'm not the first one to be confused or to try to explain this to patients and stop them from being confused. So the company, this NMR, I forget the name of the company. It's NMR something, NMR profiles, NMR spectrums or something. Anyway, they put all these calculations together. They say, well, how many of the VLDLs does she have, and are they small? How many of the LDLs, those bad cholesterols, does she have, and are they big? And how many of the HDLs does she have, and are they big? Okay, so it's a lot of numbers. But if you compile them all together, and the 45 is this calculation. It's not a measurement. It's just a score based on how much weight should be given to a fluffy LDL versus a smaller HDL. And so the lower the number, the more healthy I am. So if you add all those up together, you'd have a number of 25. So my cholesterol profile is very healthy. If I was my doctor telling me what to do, I would not prescribe a medication. The numbers are beautiful. But if I was only going to look at the total LDL, which is what you sent off to your lab and paid $25 or $40 for, was a lipid profile. It was actually trying to calculate the total LDL particles. Well, that number is 1,500. So it looks dangerous. But I'm here to tell you that it's deceiving. The total particle number isn't what matters. It is how quickly is that particle moving from space to space in the body. And that is based on insulin. that is based on some genetics. And so you say, well, good grief, doc, that's a lot. Isn't there an easier way to get there? And there certainly is. And that's what I told you last week, to go get your ApoB and your Lp(a) checked. ApoB, I don't have a price for that, but the Lp(a) was expensive, like $120. Like, it shouldn't be that expensive, but it was that expensive. So I just want to give you one little thing. ApoB is measuring all of these: chylomicrons, VLDL, IDL, LDL, and Lp(a). The ApoA is only measuring your HDL cholesterol. Okay, so the key thing that I want you to notice here is that this bad boy, this Lp(a), is part of the ApoB family. Okay, I'm going to explain that a little bit more in a second. Just for the record, chylomicrons last in your blood like a hot second. They are just so quick, you can hardly measure them. VLDLs are very much dependent on whether or not your insulin is high. High insulin, that VLDL stays in your blood a long time. We don't want that. Remember how mine was small in number, and they were smaller in size? That's because I got rid of them really quickly because my insulin's not high. So in this process, notice that, let's see if I can do this. This is ApoB. This is ApoB, this is ApoB, 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 that's ApoA. Okay, so the ApoB family, when I'm measuring it, is all this, but there's more. There's this bad boy called Lp(a). So Lp(a) is the setting where the ApoB is oxidized. The LDL with its ApoB on it is it turns purple. It got smaller, it turned purple, and now an extra protein gets put onto that LDL, and it really turns it into the devil. So let me just show you this little cartoon to try and teach a little bit easier. So here was my healthy liver, right? And here were those LDL cholesterols. But if the LDL cholesterol hung out in circulation too long, I don't know if you can tell in that picture, but it is smaller, tiny little bit smaller, and it has horns. The horns stand for the Lp(a). It's like an extra little tag that gets put on that oxidized LDL cholesterol. And I'm telling you, if you got to measure one number, and I know this was the slide I put out, like what number should you know if you're worried about a heart attack? The number you need to know for sure is your Lp(a). Because as these receptors on my liver are going to try and recycle my cholesterol, it will allow the LDL cholesterols to fit in there, but the Lp(a) can't. It stays in circulation. And the higher the Lp(a) is, the higher the risk of a heart attack. In fact, when I write for a statin, what I'm really doing is increasing the number of these. It goes to your liver and says, I'll upregulate these receptors. I need more of them. And it is fair to say that when you are taking a statin, you are recycling, you're getting that cholesterol back into your liver. But the ones you're recycling are your fluffy ones. So you only get this chance to do it for a short period of time. And if insulin keeps them in circulation for too long, they get small, they get dense, and God forbid they get that little protein put on it to make it into an Lp(a). A statin can't take care of that. So it's not like, so first of all, this is not medical advice. I am truly just explaining how cholesterol works in our body. Do not make any decisions about your cholesterol without talking to your doctor. This is a great way for your doctor to learn, but for you to learn that here's what's happening. Here's why every doctor does still say, well, I know I can lower the LDL if I have them take a statin. What I'm pointing out is this bad boy is, this is what is damaging you. This is what has to change. You have to lower the insulin in order to fix this. The other thing that miraculously fixes this are the drugs out there that you take a shot of every 2 weeks called PCSK9 inhibitors. They have antibodies, and their antibodies have a radar system that goes to find that little protein, and it gobbles it up. It literally removes all of the Lp little a ApoBs. It is kind of magical. We aren't going to talk about that tonight, though. So when you go to look at our patient, who are the person who comes to group, he shows up, and his ApoB was 156. Okay, remember, he didn't get that checked beforehand. He only checked that after he started the keto diet. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means his chylomicrons are up, his VLDL is up, his LDL is up, his ILDL is up, and all of the ApoBs are up. But what we really care about is, all right, how many of these bad boys are hanging out? How many of the LDL cholesterols got really tiny? And how many of the LDL cholesterols then got horns put on them? And we call these Lp little a. So his Lp little a was as good as mine. That's the whole point I was trying to get to. I think that's my last slide. Yeah, it's my last slide. Okay, so that is not to be summarized in 2 seconds. When people write in and ask me questions about cholesterol, and then they want me to give you a quick answer, it does not work that way. You really actually need to understand the physiology. When I get asked questions about cholesterol, I'm going to ask things like, what was your Dr. Boz ratio? Why would I do that? Why would I want to know that? Because that's helping me see what is your insulin level. And after you go keto and you do pretty good and then you stall, that means your insulin adjusted to your new way of eating. You need to stress your metabolism. You need to flex it. And that's a good idea. How do you do that? Oh, that's what we do on this channel. That's what I keep trying to educate you on. So I am going to take your questions. I have asked my team to say, keep it to the questions about cholesterol, because I actually feel bad when you guys ask the questions about cholesterol that I just can't take them on without doing some education. And oh my goodness, do I want you to put comments in this thing to say, did you understand? Did this make sense? Because I could go on for a couple more hours explaining to you what cholesterol does, what happens with high insulin, what happens to the other particles, but I'm really trying to not lose my audience, which I hope I didn't lose you. I hope you understood. Let's go to the questions here, because I do see a few of them over here. Oh, there's some good ones. Let's go to here. Questions. Thank you. Oh, goodness. Well, this is the perfect question. Let me make this a little bit smaller. There we go. Oopsie, almost a little. I'll get it there. My steering is just a little off. There we go. Okay. It says, how long after starting keto should we measure our cholesterol to not alarm the non-keto MDs? What factors came into play when deciding? Okay, so this is truly, this gentleman showed up. I think you'd call them a snowbirder, because he's going to be here for a few weeks and then he's going to disappear. But luckily, he got my attention and I said, oh, I'm going to use your case. Is that okay? He's like, sure. Is that how I'm going to find out the answer? I'm like, yep, you better watch the live. So he checked his cholesterol right after starting, and I would never do that. I mean, even I know a ton about this. I study this, and he's going to need an NMR to look at his cholesterol, but I wouldn't even have him check that until he's months into stable. His liver is good at upregulating and recycling. That before keto, he was handling it pretty well. And you can see that you don't make those Lp little a's, those little devils, in a week. You make them when they hang out in your blood for weeks and weeks and weeks. So, I mean, he'd only been keto like 5 weeks when we measured that. So thankfully, his genetics don't make a lot of the Lp little a. But even I'm not going to be able to advise him correctly until I see how he stays the course. Because he will be the first to admit that says, yeah, I'm pretty good for a while, and then I just crash and burn. I'm like, no, keep coming to group. Support groups are really important. And that way, if you fall off, you don't fall off for long. That I would not check cholesterol for 6 months, because now in his case, he might stabilize a little quicker. But most human beings are going to fall for the trick of, oh, I can have a few carbs. And then they're not really good at stopping. Or Christmas lasts 6 weeks. Or their birthday is when everybody else has a birthday too. So I wouldn't recommend that. I would recommend the long game. Like, how well are you doing? It is truly why there is a continuum. You don't need, You don't need a rocket scientist to learn this, but you do need some very methodical steps and a support group to stay the course. So the reason I tell patients, don't look at your cholesterol before 6 months, because that's when I can tell your liver is doing what it's supposed to do now. Your particles have normalized at a size. I mean, if he would spend the $82 at an NMR, it's going to see a crop of the particles that were made when he was not keto, and then a crop of the particles that were made when he is keto, and then take an average. I mean, well, don't do that. Check it when your body is stable, and that stability comes from week after week after week that you have an eating window. So for the catch up, he did come to group today and said, boy, I opened up my eating window and I do feel better. There's a pickleball. I don't know if you guys know pickleball. Pickleball is like everything in Florida right now. So he goes, I played pickleball for a couple hours and I had all the energy. I feel so good. That's what you're supposed to stay on keto. Now remember, he was not saying that on week 3. He couldn't keep his energy. He felt terrible. He had a headache. He just felt awful. And I'm like, stop it. Stop eating. You stop jumping to number 12 on the keto continuum. I need you to open up the eating window. And of course, God bless him. The first question he asked me is, can I fast yet? I'm like, no, wait till next week. Ask me that question next week. And I do appreciate him because, well, maybe I can smell my own kind. Let's go back to some questions here. All right. So Linda writes in, can an alcoholic liver be repaired like a non-alcoholic? Several in my tribe enjoy too much wine. Well, the good news is that when drinking wine, you want the least inflammation in your liver. You want the least tax to your liver. And if you want to see the fastest way to make a cirrhotic liver, cirrhosis of the liver, cirrhosis is where it gets so hard that we have to transplant it. That's the end stage for alcoholism. Well, then you have a bunch of sugar and alcohol. So if they're keto and then they like their wine, well, less wine is always better for your brain, but it's not their liver I'm worried about if they're keto and they drink a glass or so of wine. Excess alcohol, though, is hard on your brain. It's hard on it asks your liver to do a pretty powerful job. But if your liver's not all busy the rest of the day taking care of sugar, it probably handles the wine pretty good. Okay, so good question though. Let's go back to the questions and say, all right, next one is Capri says, okay, I've been 16.8, last bite before 3 p.m. Good to note that. For 10 days with Dr. Boz ratios under 50 and several in the 20s. I've had 0 weight loss. What am I doing wrong? Stay the course, okay? So if you're at 10 days of good numbers, just know that your body will get there. With these kind of numbers, a Dr. Boz ratio under 50 and an eating window that is this little, you're going to get there. I can tell by the numbers. I can tell that your insulin is responding, and even if the weight doesn't change. Again, remember, weight loss, okay, I have this wrestler, right? And he has to weigh in at 138 pounds before every meet. So what is the biggest way to manipulate your weight? What does every wrestler do? Okay, every wrestler does in order to make weight. They stop doing what? They stop drinking water a day before they have to weigh in. Fluid is what makes the weight go fast. So when you are in a ketogenic state, when you have Dr. Boz ratios of 50 or 20, I guarantee you the inflammation in your body is minimal. So that's good. Now I'm trying to lose actual fat. And so that's a half a pound a week, maybe a pound a week if you push your body a little bit. But it's slow. At 10 days, your scale has got an error rate of a half a pound. So just stay the course, especially if 16.8 feels good to you. You're saying, I am okay. I enjoy this. I'm in this for the long game. Because if you stay 16.8 for 6 months and say, all right, it's not a race. It is the longevity of this process that I'm trying to help you hack. And you've got the data that says it's not like the last 10 diets you've done, where when you don't have weight loss for a week, something must be wrong. No, it's not wrong. You just have removed all of the easy stuff, which is the water weight. And when the water weight is gone, now I'm going to measure fat weight. That's what you're losing with that. I mean, if you get to 6 weeks and there's no weight loss, well, I would encourage you to do what I'm going to do, which is that 21-day course. Man, did I shape up a lot of problems in that course. Or you're going to tighten to the next level. But don't do it too soon. Don't do what this guy is doing, which is he wants to go to the next level. He wants the best results. I'm like, no, the long game. I want you to succeed at the long game. So stay the course. You've only been there 10 days. Get out to 60 days before you make any big decisions, because you're doing lots of things right based on those numbers. I know we're almost to the top of the hour, but I'm trying to get through a couple more questions because, oh boy, are they, I'm happy to finally answer cholesterol questions without, hopping over them. So here is Patty or Patricia. Non-sugar sweeteners. What's the story with them in keto? I read that some prompt an insulin response, but not all. What does Dr. Boz recommend? Well, the truth is that I would be, I tell folks, don't chase the sweetness too much. I mean, the addiction is real. So let's start with this. When I have somebody super insulin resistant and they are addicted to sugar, harm reduction is step one. And that means if they're drinking a Coke with sugar in it, I'm going to push them to Diet Coke. Get the calories out of the game. Get the carbs gone. And that is first step one. By golly, every time that's been studied where they took the calories out and they left the sweetness in, the cohort, the population did get better. Now, did they get all the way better? They stall. You're asking specifically to say, are they getting an insulin response? The insulin response is well, first of all, it's measurable. Okay, so take the person. There's a couple of people that come to group that they just have such an addiction to sugar. And you say, okay, step one is get the sugar out of it. So if that's stevia, whatever that is for them, good job. Add ketones. That does help them because I want their body practicing burning ketones. I don't want you taking ketones forever. I just want them to not stall without progress in their metabolism over time. And those sugar substitutes really help them to get from terrible to, okay, pretty good. But now when you're pretty good and you say, well, I'm not really losing weight anymore. Oh, well, check to see if you have an insulin response. Oh, how do I do that? Well, you get up in the morning and you check your numbers, and whatever they are, you got a sugar and you have ketones. And then you take whatever it is you're testing. So call it Diet Coke. Okay, so take a Diet Coke. There's no sugar in Diet Coke. Okay, but there is some sugar substitutes. So swallow the Diet Coke, and then a half an hour later, check your glucose and your ketones and see what they are. And then glucose and ketones. And my bet is if your ketones are pretty good and your glucose is low, your glucose is going to rise and your ketones are going to slump. That is an insulin response. So I would never have you go check insulin at the lab. Insulin at the lab turns into a bunch of your money, a fight with the lab, and insulin is so volatile that you actually get a more accurate response when you measure the two molecules that insulin controls in rapid succession, which is glucose and ketones. That's the Dr. Oz ratio. So good question. There's how you solve that. And it's different for everybody. It's actually different for the same person in their time. Like when they go from a whole bunch of sugar, 12 Mountain Dews a day, and then I say, well, go to sugar-free Mountain Dew. Let's start there. Okay? I don't like the taste. I don't care. Get used to the taste. You got used to the taste of that rotten drink in the first place. Get used to the taste. And then we graduate further. So as you look, at first, the lack of the glucose is a big improvement. And then their body's insulin stabilizes. And now it'll prevent the weight loss if you're at this level. So people say, I checked that once. I'm like, what was your metabolism? How strong was your mitochondria when you checked it the last time? So checking your own insulin response, easy, cheap. If you go out the Dr. Boz Favorites and you look for meters, that's what I put them on there for. Okay, so let's see. I have two more that I will answer, and then I'm going to check my numbers. So let's go here. So would a high hemoglobin from low oxygen raise blood glucose numbers? Okay, so I've been keto for 5 months, carbs under 20, my blood glucose sits in the high 90s. Yeah, it's insulin resistance before it's anything else, Jeff, or motorsport. The high hemoglobin, I thought you were going to ask a question about hemoglobin A1C, and that was going to be a little longer answer. But you're just asking about your finger prick blood sugars, right? So those blood sugars are 90. That's not going to be changed much by hemoglobin. That's insulin resistance. So keep it up. If you haven't got the book, KetoCONTINUUM, the workbook, it walks you through. You can stay at this level, but when it's time to push your metabolism, doom, I need you to definitely level up to the next stress point for your body. And that's what I do with my folks in the clinic. That's where the book came from, is here's what I do. This is not that hard. Follow the rules. Follow the plan. Don't skip a page. All right, last one. I watched the ferritin video and it still wasn't clear why being high shouldn't be alarming. Okay, so a high ferritin, the first thing people talk about with a high ferritin is it's an inflammatory response. It's a sign of inflammation. Mine is not a sign of inflammation. It just says I have a bunch of iron and I'm moving it around. Okay, so what happens if you have high iron for weeks on end? High iron for, I'm going to wait for the people. I'm going to check my numbers and say, okay, somebody has a life of high iron. They die of something. What is that? Let's see if I can watch this. Let's see. I'm going to wait to see if you guys can come up with it while I check my numbers. They have high iron forever and ever and ever. What do they die from? So what could I be dying from if my ferritin's high? Okay, what's the doctor worried about? And I will tell you, I don't have it. All right, I'm getting my numbers out. I am super excited because I get it. My husband has forbidden me to take my computer out while I'm at the wrestling tournament tomorrow. I was supposed to record a couple videos today and I did not get them done. Yes, ASAN. The answer is hemochromatosis. That's what somebody else said it too, actually. Paula, hemochromatosis is the answer. Yes, that's what happens. And hemochromatosis causes a liver transplant. Are the men that end up in trouble? Women have periods, so they bleed out every month and they prevent this from happening. But how old are the men when their liver goes wrong? They're in their 40s. They're in their 50s. They're in their 60s. They've been having high iron for 60 years before they hardened their liver. My ferritin hasn't been high for 60 years. Oh, good. So I know that my iron studies, which we also covered on that show. So ketones only went up by 0.9. I bet if I wait for just like 2 minutes, it goes up. I can totally feel it hitting my system. But the ferritin doesn't get better my ferritin's not been that high forever. I've been keto. I eat plenty of liver. I have nice amount of iron. If you've watched my brain show, my brain course, I talk a lot about the brain function can't be fixed. Depression can't be fixed if your iron's low, if your ferritin's below 50. So my ferritin's plenty. It means I got a lot of proteins delivering iron around in different parts of my body. I am not worried. My iron numbers are normal. My ferritin is high. There is no other inflammatory number high in my body. It just means I got a bunch of iron. That's not bad. I haven't had it for 60 years. I'm only 51 years old. I'm not worried. My liver enzymes look lovely. I do not have hemochromatosis. All of this is negative. So when you look at I was going to recheck this ketone number here. When you look at a few other predictors of what I'm trying to learn with iron is I want to know, do I have enough to make the kind of improvements that I'm trying to make in my brain and body? Yes, I do. I will tell you that I have been in communication with KetoCon. I think I'm going to do this cholesterol lecture at KetoCon in a lot better, more succinct way, and the slides need a lot of work before I get there. So let's see if I waited long enough to check this ketone because I can feel it. The other thing I was going to tell folks is that I just submitted for a addiction lecture at Low Carb USA. I haven't been approved, but it looks positive. Yeah, 0.9, and then a minute later it's 1.1. It's totally on the rise. I can feel it. Anyway, I show you that to say if you're taking a ketone supplement, I don't need to take ketones. I make plenty of them. I only take them for the show to say, don't take ketone supplements without checking that it raises your ketones. It needs to raise your ketones. So that's the whole point of that. In the meantime, if you want to learn more about this, I actually am going to link to an end screen at the end that is to my previous live that talked all about this, because it is a 2-part series. And if you got confused and you need me to go slower, I went slower in the other one. And then you could rewatch this one again and say, yeah, there is a point to this. So Merry Christmas. And I truly appreciate all of you tuning in. Please pray for my son to have no injuries and a lot of pins. And if you're near Kissimmee, Florida, and want to come to a wrestling tournament, I will be there hollering for my boy. So Merry Christmas. I'm not sure if I'm doing a show next week. I will keep you posted, but we'll see you in the new year if I don't. I will be doing group next week. So all you Tampa people that want your support group is happening next week, and